Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. And in this video, I'd like to discuss the increasing concerns that Elon Musk is on a bit of a mission to not just destroy the United States, as a threat to his mate Putin, but also the UK. His attacks on our government orchestrated on his social media platform are obvious. And now there are unconfirmed reports that he might donate $100 million to Reform UK just to annoy Keir Starmer. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So the latest concerns of Putin-directed foreign interference in our politics are reported in the Sunday Times yesterday. They said there are concerns from leading businessmen and Conservative Party officials that Elon Musk could be prepared to donate $100 million to Reform UK in order to upset Keir Starmer. Now, there are a few things you could say about this, but let's begin with how it's even possible. See, during the last Parliament, the Conservatives passed the National Security Act. It was designed to update the rules on, amongst other things, political donations. Sounds good. However, a weakness was identified and an amendment proposed, which is what amendments are for. Foreign donations are illegal, but the proposed amendment would have required the recipient of the donations to carry out due diligence on the real source of the money. Just because it appears to come from Britain, does it really? The amendment did not just come from overly concerned backbench MPs either. It was supported by a former head of MI5, Jonathan Evans, as well as the chair of the Security Committee, Tory MP, Julian Lewis. This did actually have the support of some Tory MPs. However, Rishi Sunak whipped his MPs to vote it down. Now, as I said at the time, why would a government passing legislation to tighten up the rules against foreign donations block a move to make sure donation recipients had a duty to make sure the rules were being followed? Because after all, a rule that is not enforced is no rule at all. What it means that is with the current legislation, Elon Musk may be able to donate through British-based businesses like Twitter. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely the case. It could be a bit of a grey area because Musk could probably make a substantial donation through his UK subsidiaries. But $100 million is a lot of money. And it would probably be quite hard to show that that money had not just been funneled by Musk from his offshore accounts and ones outside the UK. But this is where the enforcement is a problem. Let us say Reform UK received $100 million from one or more of Musk's UK-based businesses all at once or over a period of time. It'd actually be harder to enforce over a period of time. Reform UK are under no legal obligation to check that the money really has come from the UK. Musk could dump $100 million into the UK branch of, say, Tesla or Twitter or whatever, tell them to pass it on to Nigel Farage. Nobody really has to check. The Electoral Commission might launch an investigation, sure, because it's a lot of money to be ignoring. For reference, particularly for our American cousins, because you think about $100 million, oh, that's nothing. Kamala Harris wiped her ass with that the day before the election. Yeah, sure. In this country, we don't spend that much money. $100 million, just under £80 million, would be more money than all of the political parties in the whole of the UK spent on the general election we had this year combined. But the Electoral Commission has no real teeth. If they investigated and found Reform UK guilty, they can be fined £20,000. That's a small change when you've just been given £79 million, isn't it? Even if unspent funds had to be returned, it's not just a case of, OK, you've got to pay £20,000 fine, but you can keep the money. Let's say they say, well, you can't keep the money. Nothing would be done about the money that they'd already spent on dodgy political adverts before the donations were ruled illegal. And the investigation would presumably take some time because both Reform UK and whichever Musk businesses were involved would obstruct the investigation at every opportunity. And I don't think there are any real penalties for doing so. So although Labour have suggested that they will close this loophole this Parliament, it's a suggestion. The line in the manifesto is not entirely clear, I have to say. It's a little bit ambiguous, like a lot of lines in manifestos are. But although they have suggested that they are going to tighten this up, there are people who are understandably of the belief that maybe sooner rather than later would be better. Any moves to tighten up political donations were conspicuous by their absence in the King's Speech. Now, I said at the time, obviously the King's Speech does not contain everything in the manifesto. It's what they're going to do first. That means there is no anticipated legislation proposed for some time. And when it is, It could easily take the best part of a year to be passed into law. Musk could have 2 or 3 years to spend whatever he likes on his childish grudge against Starmer before the government do anything about it. But although there are lots of things we should do to tighten up funding rules for politics, it would surely not take too long to just resurrect that one amendment from the last year with a view to further reviewing the legislation later this Parliament. So will the threat of Musk flooding regressive politics with such a lot of money concern Starmer enough to get him to act quickly? Well, hopefully. But if I'm being honest, I suspect not. Now, I'd love to be proved wrong, but there are a few factors which work against it. I'm going to go over 2 of the main ones. The first is that the government, if let's say the government do decide to bring that amendment back, they haven't, it wasn't in the King's speech, so they weren't planning on doing it. So this is an emergency measure, right? So they bring that amendment back with a view to a more thorough review later on. It will look like a blatant attempt to fire shots back at Musk. Right now, Labour are trying to calm tensions down. We don't really want the Trump tariffs. This might well do the opposite. Second, big factor. See, consider the exact wording from the Sunday Times article. I quote, "This weekend, leading businessmen and Conservative Party officials believe there is a credible prospect that Musk is preparing to give $100 million to Farage as an FU Starmer payment with a view to transforming British politics." So if true, this would be Musk throwing the money at Farage to annoy Starmer. Yet, the article quotes the Conservatives raising the issue, not Labour. Doesn't say anything about Labour Party officials being concerned. Now, why would that be? Because although Reform would inevitably use the money to mount a major disinformation campaign against Labour, the Conservatives would also be targeted. And Reform currently attract way more Conservative than Labour votes. It's much easier for them to do so. Conservative voters are much more on their wavelength. So although Labour do want to weaken Farage and Reform UK, I'm not convinced they are as motivated as they should be when, in a first-past-the-post system, they represent a bigger drain on Conservative than Labour votes, which is net good for Labour. Because although Musk has said that Reform UK will win the next general election, they absolutely will not. Interestingly, Steve Baker weighed in on the subject as well.
As far as I'm concerned, it's plainly wrong to put so much money, through a subsidiary, and to do it in this way is, as I say, plainly against the spirit of the rules. But the other thing I would say is no amount of money, I'm afraid, I'm not afraid. I mean, I think it's a statement of the obvious. No amount of money is going to make Nigel Farage popular with the people who he currently repels. I mean, he is not going to get Conservative to Lib Dem switchers over to Reform, and it's just inconceivable. You know, people loathe him, as I'm afraid they loathe me over Brexit. I at least have made emollient speeches for which I won a prize, but Nigel's done no such thing. And people aren't going to change their mind about Brexit. They aren't going to change their mind about Nigel Farage. And I think not only would he be breaking the spirit of the rules, he'd also be completely wasting $100 million.
Now, this is just Baker's opinion, of course, but I will say there's good reason for it. First of all, Farage is objectively unpopular with a lot of people, and he has been for a very long time. So those views of the pound shop Powell are fairly entrenched. Unlike Starmer's approval ratings, which were really high one minute, really low the next, so are much more malleable. And Labour have got the option of replacing Starmer if he doesn't rescue his poll ratings once the policies start to bear fruit and they start looking at the next election. Reform UK are stuck with Farage. The other thing to consider is that Farage would use the money to attack Labour and the Conservatives. I bet he wouldn't use any of it to boost his own image. Wouldn't even occur to him to do that. So here's how I think Labour see things. Doesn't mean the following will definitely happen, but I would bet my right buttock, which is the good one, that this is what they're thinking. So in a few years' time, their policies will be making the cost of living ease. So the NHS will be on the road to recovery. There'll be more housing available. We'll have a closer relationship with the EU. People's pay packets will be heavier, and voters will see that things have definitely improved. In that environment, Farage will struggle more to displace Labour votes, but he will be able to further squeeze the Tories because they seem determined to present themselves as a less committed version of Farage's outfit and have made no efforts to apologise for what they did to the country and government. I'll be honest, rightly or wrongly, I can see Labour not being as alarmed by this news as I and others are. And of course, we don't know that Musk does intend to donate this money, although I do think there's a serious risk. But I think Labour view this as something the Tories are alarmed at and think that anything that's bad for the Tories is good for them. I don't know that this is how they're thinking, but I would not be at all surprised. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.